Hi, and welcome to She's the Boss Chats. I'm your host, Jules Brooke, and in the show, I interview amazing women and female founders about what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it. It's all about us lifting up the women around us. Melanie Dancer, I am very excited to have you on this podcast because you are one very interesting woman.
Well, thank you. It's been a long time coming.
It has. Well, I mean, I have never met you in person, but we've spoken over the phone and I absolutely love what it is that you do. So why don't you tell all the listeners now what it is that you do and a little bit of why you're doing it.
So I started a business early this year after many years of thinking about it, and it's called Out of the Blue. It is a suite of professional services for police officers to look at what they're currently doing in their career and whether they would like to stay in their career or leave their career. And of course, there's loads of reasons why police might leave their career. But the reason I started it was because I myself was a former police officer. I specialised in sex crime and child abuse, worked at the pedophile task force. I was one of those specialised police negotiators who used to talk people down of buildings and out of houses and
Oh
and that
my
kind of
goodness,
thing.
the stress of doing something like that. Like, I really admire you, and obviously we need people like you doing it, but oh my God, yeah.
And I loved my career. I have the utmost respect and still have a lot of friends in policing, and I worked under some fantastic people, both women and men. But it got to a point and a particular time in my life where the belief system that I had around what was keeping me in policing wasn't suiting me anymore. I started to be able to have opportunities outside of policing, like being invited to be on boards. I had started a scholarship study on changing some legislation in South Australia through a government scholarship that
So
I'd won.
maybe you were what they call an intrapreneur. Have you heard
Yes,
of that term? So you were exercising your entrepreneurial muscles within the police force.
I was, and I am a career networker. I came to appreciate very early on, and I never got held back in policing. I always was able to progress in the areas that I wanted to. But
Yeah.
I also always found myself attracted to the social science of policing and people, and found myself in some really interesting positions, so that I was able to get a really good depth of breadth of what was happening externally to what was South Australia Police, but also how police interacted with the other side, so life in general and how that interfaced. And my particular interest in justice and victimology and how that impacted people through very long drawn out processes and how the judicial system actually interfaced with society, I really took quite seriously. So I had this very executive opinion internally around how the justice system and policing works with people. And of course, recently you only have to look at how much
You do.
publicity and police are they can't do it. They can't do it right. They can't do it wrong. It's they're damned if they do. They're damned if they don't. And that sits with police, and they often get to a point where they don't know what to do next or whether to stay. What's confusing them, where their moral compass is being pushed. And so that's where I saw a gap, because I moved on from policing and then went on to have a very successful executive career in a number of industries.
Oh, okay. So you haven't just come from being a police officer straight into this. You've done something in between.
Oh,
Oh, well,
yes.
look, so hold on a minute, and I'm going to get you to chronologically take me through, because not so much your career as in a resume, but I am fascinated. And I'd say loads of people, I don't want to say everyone is, but we've all watched those crime TV shows. We've all seen the stresses and strains of police work. And we all know what it's like to be on the other side, but we don't know what it's like inside. And I can only begin to imagine what it would be like if you wanted to leave. I mean, my father was in the British Army they put him through medical school. So that was really why he became an obstetrician. So that's 12 years. And I think he did 14 years with them. And then there's that whole thing. I mean, and you get that in a lot of institutionalized things where people go, well, I don't know, even know whether I have the capacity to run my own business. I don't know whether I can work out there in the real world. So I really would love to have that conversation with you. But I don't know where to start with this one because I was going to say what was the light bulb moment, but I reckon that we should probably go back further and then come up to the light bulb moment. Do you want to lead the way? Tell me about your entrepreneurial journey and also your life in the police force and some stories around it.
So, so,
There you go.
I guess through I had completed CIB school, so detective training school, and
Right.
part
And
of
what sort of age are you at that stage? Is this young?
I would have been about, oh gosh, you're talking
I mean, late
30,
20s, 30s.
30.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
Gosh, I would have
29.
thought you were only about 30 now.
Oh,
No.
goodness me. If only you knew. No.
If anyone was watching this Zoom call, they'd be going, oh my goodness, she's not talking 30s in the past.
No,
All
I'm
right,
actually,
so
just
yes,
to put it in context, I'm 48 and I
right.
joined at 22 and I,
And how old were you when you left?
uh, it's been 12 years.
Wow, right. Okay, so take us back first. So why did you even want to go into the police force?
What joining? I wanted to help. I wanted to
Right.
help.
Hey,
Very, very plain and simple.
family history of it? Did you have any relatives who'd been police officers?
My grandfather was a Commonwealth police officer who'd come from the UK
Okay.
in the British Army,
Yep.
and worked up at Maralinga and
Right.
on the, yeah, to protect the NASA airbase and that kind of thing. But other than that, we didn't really talk about it. I don't come from a traditional policing family, but I do come from a public service family. So
Okay.
yeah, and I was highly interested in joining because I saw it as a really exciting job, and I still to this day highly recommend anyone who's interested in searching for that, and I certainly can help with those questions as well. But
Yeah.
so I joined the police and went on to patrols as you do, which is the general uniformed roles. And then I got opportunities to start doing a few specific investigations and found myself being particularly good at eliciting interviewing people and listening and doing cognitive interviewing techniques. So I found that I had a bit of a pathway into investigation and rather than
Right.
general
So hang on.
policing.
Sorry, just for those of people that might be as slow as I am, what do you mean when you say cognitive? I mean, interviewing would be fabulous, I would have thought. But were you able to do that whole "I know he's lying because he's blinking his left eye and looking up to the right" or that kind of thing, or what was it?
A bit of that. I mean, a lot of it is body language, but it's around how you construct a conversation with somebody, allow them to talk for 80% of the time, then go back and get them to go over information. And that means you're not missing as much. So you allow them to go through the information, then go back in time, and then actually go forward in time. And you'll often find out a lot of information through that process.
Ah,
So
fascinating.
yeah, so I ended up in the sexual assault unit investigating rape. And
Right.
here's a funny story. My call sign was actually sexual assault 69. Um,
Oh my God.
make of that
Was
what
that
you
intentional?
make of that what you will. Um,
Is this that, do you think, and I don't want to rave about it, but was it that male culture, do you think, having a joke, or was it really just coincidence that you were number 69 of the whatever?
it was the next call
You
sign
would
on
have
the list.
thought they'd have skipped that number, actually, when you think about it, but anyway,
It caused a lot of giggles over the
I bet
radio.
it did.
So there was an opportunity in the early 2000s when the Anglican Church inquiry had started to where a task force was set up, and I was approached by the now Commissioner of Police, Grant Stevens, to join that task force, and that set me on a path of specialised policing in sex crime and child abuse. So whilst I had conducted other investigations through the other department I was working
Yeah.
with, this was a specific and very highly political area. So I was able to undertake my detective training while I was there, and I also became attracted to becoming a police negotiator, which of course is very interesting. You're called out at all hours of the night to literally talk people down off buildings and talk people out of houses holding babies and machetes and that sort of thing. So it was
So that really happens. I guess I see it in crime scene CSI and all those kind of, SUV, whatever, and you think, oh, that's just really extreme and in America. And I know that we see a bit in the media here, but is it really happening all the time and we're just not aware of it?
Nearly every day, police negotiators are
Wow.
called out. You don't hear about it. It's not something that
No,
you want to publicise, but it could be
no.
a suicide intervention. It could be an exploitation kidnapping. It could be a siege. And they can last
Gosh.
anywhere from 30 minutes up to 3 days.
Oh
And
my goodness.
mm,
So you had a lot of, I mean, and I don't want to keep interrupting your story, but talk about mental health strain. You can really see just from what you're saying how stressful it is to be within the force. But keep going, because I mean, you hear these stories about people, and I want you to paint that picture, and then we'll go into what you're doing now and why.
the hypervigilance that I had around my work was pretty consistent. At one point, well, at lots of times during the year, I had three phones by my bed. I had a CIB on-call phone, I had a negotiator phone, I had my phone. So you're in a constant state of heightened stress. What that does
Yep.
physically to you is it builds and it doesn't allow your cortisol levels to reduce. So your stress is always heightened. Now, people, obviously, this is a personal physiological phenomenon, and some people cope with heightened stress differently to others. But for me, I began to lose who I was as an individual and started to probably identify myself way too much to my job. And the stories that I was hearing, especially through sexual assault stories undertaking. I was interviewing men in their 40s, 50s and 60s around historical sex crime that had happened in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s.
Oh, right. Cold cases like that long ago.
Yes, and so it was, you were trusted, you were in a very, I considered a very privileged position to be guiding people through this process. You had very intimate details from people, not only for historical crime, but also for current crimes that were going on. So it raises and heightens your stress levels, and can start to mess with your mind, so much so that I started to disassociate from my family, started to do some risk-taking behaviours, poor choices, disassociated from family, and started to identify myself through my job. And it was around this time when I had taken on another task around completing a scholarship around a change in legislation that I just kept adding to my bucket, adding, because I wanted to achieve so much. I wanted to,
Oh, Melanie, I can feel it now. I mean, just even as you describe it, and to almost disassociate. I mean, it really, just as you're saying that, actually, it really does make sense of the fact that there are so many damaged people out there. When you think of a childhood, say, going through those kind of stresses,
yeah.
no wonder you end up being damaged in a way that you can't control anyway. But yeah, so keep going on. So really started getting to you, really tough.
Absolutely. And I remember having a couple of episodes where I had dealt with some very young children and literally couldn't get out of bed to go back to work. And I didn't even want to look in my locker and look at my notebook and things like that, because it would bring too many memories. Now, you might say, surely there's help, surely there's police psychologists. There's a welfare
Yeah.
section, that there are those systems in place. But to get people to those places,
To admit the vulnerability, I guess, is the biggest thing, because you're trying to hold it all together.
yes,
And you know that the moment that you say, I'm really not coping with this, they're going to start throwing the book at you and going, oh, well, you shouldn't be a policeman. And,
if I wasn't going to do this job, what was I going to do?
oh, Mel, yeah. I mean, there are lots and lots and lots of people that 100% identify with their jobs, but that really brings it home. Yeah. So what did you do?
I had to take some time out, and I basically had a breakdown. I
Were
had a
you
break.
forced to?
Sorry?
Did you offer? Did you say, I need the space? Or did you end up with your boss saying to you, you really need to slow down?
I rang my friend one morning. I literally couldn't move, couldn't get out of bed. And I said, you need to get someone around here because I'm going to do something to myself.
Oh, no. Yeah. I mean, totally understandable, but God almighty.
And
Right?
so they sent police welfare around, and I effectively went on stress leave, but I only wanted stress leave for 4 days. I wanted to get back to work.
4 days. Because you went, I'll be able to sort myself out like that.
Well, I kind of designed my own return to work plan. I identified 3 places in Safehold that I would like to go and be productive and switch off. And I
Right.
went to my preferred place and I worked there for a year. And then I actually designed my own return to work plan back to CIB.
Hang on
And
a minute. So you were able to go back to work 4 days later?
yes, I
Are
went
you
back.
saying that you did into a different role, but you didn't go and have some counselling at that stage?
I was booked in to receive counselling and cognitive
Yep.
therapy. So I started that process, yes.
Right.
And it was a
But
work.
wow, they let you back because they needed you and they had, oh, yeah, right. Okay. So you
So
did another year?
it was a non-operational position. It was a strategic position. So I took a very strategic position in an area which looked after state-based problem-solving methodologies
Yeah.
for crime, and because I
But you haven't
wanted
addressed any of the issues that you were dealing with before. You're just ploughing on.
ploughing on.
Yep.
And while I was there, I was in therapy and had gone to a cognitive therapist. And that's when this particular therapist had said there's almost like a bit of there's a filing cabinet in your brain that you cannot open again. You cannot go back to your substantive position, which was in the sex crime branch. That was like being, that was the end. That was when I realized I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm going to do. And that was like being sent down the rabbit warren again, because I thought I'll just get fixed and I'll go back. But I was permanently damaged. It was vicarious traumatization
Yep.
and post-traumatic stress.
Whew.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So what do you do when all of that happens? What do you do? What do you do?
I actually, well, luckily my sanity was, I had joined a board. I joined the YWCA of Adelaide and had become the chair and was doing work on women's policy and women's safety.
Right.
I was an attractive board position, board member because of my, criminal investigation background.
Yeah.
And so I started to really branch out into my leadership skills on a board. And I was lucky enough to be selected to go to a World AIDS conference in Africa. And while I was there, I was with some of the other delegates from Adelaide, and I said to them, do you think I'd be useful working in the non-for-profit sector? And they said, are you kidding me? So,
We would do anything to have someone like you, I imagine.
and what astounded them was that I couldn't see. I look back now and know that they are looking at me going, are you kidding me? Can't you see what you've done? Can't you see how useful your skills would be? So I sought a career coach, and it took me 9 months. And I did that deliberately, slowly, because I wanted to make sure it was the right decision. And I looked at my strengths. I looked at how to read job descriptions. I looked at transferable skilling. I looked at
Yeah.
how to present myself and de-governmentize my language.
Yes, because there is a way that policemen speak that is just doesn't belong anywhere else except in a policeman's mouth, really.
Yeah, and that happens, and that's
Yeah.
like any culture, I guess. It's just that in policing, it's very compounded. And I just transitioned out, and I call it, I bought my sanity. So I transitioned out into the community services sector and worked for Mission Australia, actually, in business development, looking at all of their contracts and interpreting their outcomes. And because I'm very
Yeah.
outcomes based and understood what government speak was and interpreted their contracts and that kind of thing, and then moved through the community service sector into employment services. I was on the cutting edge worked up in Queensland on some NDIS preparation for a large organisation called Endeavour Foundation, that have a lot of offices around Australia, and was their
Right.
complaints and incident management unit senior advisor. Um, and started to work on some really cutting edge sector reform work in Australia, and started to build up my experience as a leader, as an employer, as a recruiter, as a manager, as a strategist, reporting through to boards and reporting through to executive management, and got some great roles in this time, including at the AFL.
Wow.
I was the first.
Sorry, I don't know why I go wow. I don't like football, but I am impressed.
Well, I was the first female manager in football in South Australia, and managed a whole suite of programs for South Australian football, including female development in football.
Oh,
Um,
good on you. I love everything you do.
so I kind of had a smattering of everything, and then worked my way up into executive management ship. And all through this time, I was thinking to myself, I've got this business concept around helping police do what I did if they wanted to, and or talk about what they're going through, talk about it privately and not have it attached to the department as a service.
Right. So you had identified what we were just talking earlier, which is that they can't show the weakness unless they've made that final decision of I want out. In which case it's fine however anyone looks at you because you are ready. But if you're not sure, there's no one to talk to without it kind of escalating.
Yeah,
So you saw this need to have something outside that people could, as opposed to a counsellor, somebody who understood the police. Is that
and it was about saying, look, every other profession encourages professional development. They encourage leadership. They encourage looking outside the box, talking to a mentor,
upskilling?
talking to
Yeah.
a peer. There was nothing like that in policing. There are internal programs. There is some good research going on now, which I've been approached about. But police are pretty poor at thinking outside the box to say, I'm going to go and seek that for myself, for me, not for the police, but
No.
for me personally as an individual.
Isn't that interesting that the police hadn't thought of that? Because you would actually think that that would give them much more well-rounded individuals in the end as well, that they have that, experience outside of, and also might keep people in the police longer if they had that sort of external outlet. So what happened then? What was the big light bulb moment that made you think about Out of the Blue, which is, by the way, just such a good name, such a good name.
The name Out of the Blue has sat with me for about 3 years, and I'll tell you a funny story. I was in Sydney Airport over the last Christmas holidays. We were coming back to Adelaide, and I always gravitate towards the bookshop in the airport, and I started thumbing through books on leadership and decision making and all this stuff, right? And there was this
Yep.
other book there. It was a pink book. It was glittery, and it was about social. It was about marketing and social
Okay.
media. And I was really attracted to this book, but no, I took the really boring one, and it was actually a book called Radical Candor: How to Get What You Want by Saying What You Mean.
Right.
Anyway, I was reading through this book on the plane, and I realized I knew everything in this book. I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet, but what I mean is I keep buying these same books, and I'm avoiding the thing that's attracting me, which is how would I build my business? And I got on that plane, Jules, and I started writing all the steps, all the things that I just brainstormed everything and thought, I have to do this now. I have to do it. I can't keep avoiding it. I realized that the only thing limiting me was I was limiting me.
Yep. Well, it's funny because the first time that I ever spoke to you, which I don't know whether it was it must have been if you set it up last year. It was in the summer. I remember that, and it was before Christmas. But we had a chat, and weirdly, I had been speaking. There's a woman called Carolyn Trewithick, I think, or Pethick. You probably know her, who I had met ages ago, and she'd told me about her terrible time in the police force, and and I had met her at a business event probably 3 years ago now. And I just remember how out of place she looked. She just didn't, she hadn't kind of got her head out of the police force. She just desperately wanted to write this book and then get the book out there. And I just remember thinking at the time how hard it would be to try and get into things that are just so out of your radar when you're in an institution, basically, because that's what it is.
You
It's
are
not something where they would encourage people to be entrepreneurial, which is probably an oversight anyway. But
you're well, you hold the party line because you're a serious public servant. You hold an office of constable, which means that you are wedded to the department in a lot of ways. And a lot of police don't have Facebook. They have to have a different name. All that stuff is privacy. We're not on the electoral roll. I will never ever be called for jury duty because I've been a
I think
proper.
you've done your public service, so I don't mind that you won't be called for jury duty.
But the thing is, yeah, it was. I mean, for example, I wanted to do comedy, and I wanted to do a comedian's course, and I had to wait. The first thing I enrolled in when I left the police was I enrolled in a comedy course, and I ended up becoming quarter finalist in Raw Comedy in South Australia.
Oh,
And
how fabulous.
I had some great stories.
I would say you have some brilliant stories.
So there are things that it doesn't surprise me when you say this particular woman looked out of place, because I was unsure of what I could say. I was unsure of how to present myself. I was unsure of having backlash.
Yeah.
And having haters kind of say, well, are you anti-police? I'm not. I'm very proud, and I've had a great and very fulfilling career. But I also know that there's another side to it, which is police need to be able to talk to somebody about what is going on for them professionally.
And probably before it spills over, like start doing it on the day they start the job kind of thing. Because I would imagine, and I'm only guessing, but I mean, you're a young woman, you've joined the police force. At some stage, you're going to see your first murder, and you're not going to have seen anything like it in your whole life. Or you're going to hear about some awful sex crime and go, this is so perverted and crazy. It's got to affect you from day one.
You can do all the theory that you like, and of course there's work experience when you go through any police academy, but until you are on your own with a partner, you've been sworn in, you're on the road, your first night could be a shooting, and nothing can prepare you for what you see, and you'd never know what you're going to get every single day at work. 80% of the time the work is might be quite mundane, but that 20% is a massive spike in adrenaline, and you never know when it's coming.
Yeah, right.
You might go to work at 7 a.m. and expect to be home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then something happens and you're stuck on a cordon until that midnight. Families, there's research now with the road home with Adelaide University, I think it is, with researching the impact of first responders on families, and there is a massive ongoing impact to families, and so primary
Huge.
responders and their families, on how the work impacts their life.
Because they can't plan for anything. I mean, and not that I want to make it about me, but my dad, as an obstetrician, we weren't able to plan anything because he'd say babies don't come on a 9 to 5 schedule, and same thing for you, it's gonna and also I guess you're always on call, or do you have certain shifts where you've got to be on call for if anything does happen?
I was a glutton for punishment. I was not only on call for one job, I was on call for two jobs. At
Right.
the same time. I mean, I really filled my bucket, and it was to my detriment, but there wasn't anybody looking out for me. I had to look out for myself, and I don't blame anybody for that other
No.
than it exists, right? And this
Yep.
is what I'm saying. It exists, and there's a gap. And so whilst there's always the offer of police welfare, there is a tarnish attached to that. So
Yep. So you got off that plane with basically a business plan, I bet.
I
Was
had a
it?
list of things I wanted to do and some broad concepts,
Yep.
and then I set about trying to build it, and slowly, so that I could have some control over my messaging. And I went through like an entrepreneur's course around how to message. And then I went, I really, it's really been a big journey for me on how to move through fear around
Right.
being very literal, wanting what my message actually is and what my niche actually is, and holding firm to that and trusting my path. And I've had some great, insight into myself through this process around how to pitch wording in social media, how to design a website, and so
Yes, it's all fraught with danger in a lot of ways because especially when you don't know and the fact, I mean, I didn't know that you aren't allowed to have social media accounts, but of course it makes sense. So you haven't had 10 years of being on Facebook every day for 2 hours, yeah, it's fascinating. So how do you get started? So how did you do it, and then what do you, and tell me at the same time how you then have taken that on to apply to what it is that you're offering now?
I started the building blocks and worked out what my niche client would be, what type of person they were, where they lived, where they breathed,
And
how
who are
they
they? So they're young police officers, are they? Are they your
any
clients?
any police officer
Yep.
who is looking to So this is how I defined it. There's three main reasons why police might move on or
Right.
question moving on. One is that they have an opportunity that comes their way through other stakeholders. So somebody might say to them, "Oh,
Offers
you'd
them a
be
job.
great doing such and such," and they don't know what
Right.
to do with that information. The other reason is the environment might not be working for them anymore. There might have been an incident or incidents that are happening. It could be a cultural issue or a cultural clash where your moral compass starts to get a little bit pushed, and
Yep.
it starts to feel not right anymore, or it could be conflict. And the third reason is some people just decide, oh, it's time for me to move on. I want to do something different, because the turnover rate is so much higher now.
Is it?
Yeah, it used to be an average of 7 years for 7 years for women and 12 for men. And now I'm not sure what the stats are, but they're a lot less now. There's a lot less.
Right.
Um,
Which could also be, I mean, I know when I was working, I was over in London working with the British Army, and they had a problem that they couldn't retain. So they'd get people to sign up for 2 years to put them through school or whatever, and then they just couldn't get them to stay. So, and I wonder whether that's also generational, that there are now people who, and entrepreneurship is something that's really encouraged now and wasn't really talked about, when I was younger, certainly.
There's so much more transiency. That's not a bad thing. In fact, it's probably healthy for a culture to do that, as long as the recruitment principles underlying it can keep up with the attrition.
Yeah, and maybe less damaged people coming out the other end as well.
Well, that's one of my main concerns, is if you are transitioning, how do you identify what your strengths are so that you don't just repeat the same thing? Because a lot of police just Google jobs for police, and investigator comes up and inspector
Oh
comes
gosh,
up,
really?
and
Or security.
yeah, so security guard and things like that. So, but the world is your oyster. I have proven
Yes,
that.
absolutely. Go and start an ice cream shop or, anything.
Yeah.
So in your case, you decided that you would start out of the blue and start helping people transition out of the police force if they wanted to. What does that look like?
So the professional services look like making a time to meet with me to talk about your current state. Often people go straight to the strategy, but actually we need to understand what state you're in and what the
Yeah.
story you have at the moment, and then move through to the strategy. And then we will go through, depending on your state, what you need to do. So it might be that we run some career assessments for you through an algorithm that I have a license to run, which gives you some basic principles of your strengths and your derailers, and you can actually map that against a number of different careers. It might be that you need some tools development around your resume, and I've seen some doozies that come from police, and they're incredibly wordy and mean nothing to the outside. So I'm able to cut that right down and
Yeah,
say,
and then they'd be said, well, where's your website? And they'd be like, what's that?
yeah.
I don't have one of them.
Yeah, so the hazards of how to write a cover letter that will appeal, a resume that will appeal, because I myself have recruited up to senior management executive level, so I know what an HR
What it's
manager
like.
looks like, what looks for, and I know what I would look for in a staff member, and how to map and transfer. Most importantly, map the transferable skills to a
Yep.
resume to speak to a job, and how to
So,
effectively job
so
search.
just tell me, because you probably know this, what are the stats like for the number of police that come out and maybe start their own business compared to the number of that would get sort of employment that gives them a career path, as opposed to, and no disrespect to security guards or inspectors, but as opposed to something where maybe you're heading straight back into a different type of institution.
There's a higher proportion of people that tend to gravitate towards a similar or like type of institution. Private investigations, look, they're great careers. Things like work cover, work health safeties, Safe Work Queensland,
Right.
Safe Work SA, Safe Work Victoria.
And council, kind of working with councils, I would have thought, and public servants again, still.
Yes.
What about entrepreneurship? Are there many people like you who come out and
There are
decide to set up something completely different?
There are a few coppers who actually, because of the nature of shift work, are able to start their own lawn mowing rounds and things like that.
Oh, okay.
And look, police are intrinsically quite competitive with each other, and actually quite creative, because they're problem solving all the time. So
Yeah.
there are some people who have this, completely entrepreneurial side hustle, but often do it back to back,
At the same time, right? So they get even less sleep,
even less sleep.
and even more stress, but just, I guess, transferred across something else. So, so tell me about So tell me a little bit more about your business and what it is that you're doing, and then I'm going to start talking to you about juggling work and life and things like that.
So I will do things like looking at what their state is and look at what tools they might need, any assessments that will help guide the conversations with them. And they're often very fun to do, and people are very surprised at the results that they get and have something to walk away with. There's, a hard copy report of them, and you can use the wording in cover letters and things like that. And look at helping identify where they would like to search and mapping a pathway for that to point them towards applications. So I've helped people move into the direction back into study, move into commission work, so aged care work and assessment and complaints work. And there's a range of different scenarios. It all depends on the individual. So it's about being tailored, but to some, it's about talking through what they're currently experiencing and looking at, have you exhausted all options?
Right. So within the police force, have you thought about going sideways instead of out?
That's right. Or saying, these are the options. How do you want to have a conversation with your boss about this? So having that, policing's moving towards having the normal leadership approach. Yes, it's paramilitary, but modern recruitment and modern leadership principles still apply. And there's a great move towards employing and promoting good people managers. So it is about saying, have you spoken to your sergeant, your senior sergeant, your inspector about this? This is how you might start a conversation with them and coach them in that way.
Right. Yeah. Very challenging, but I think it's a service that's so needed. And are you getting full support from the police behind this? Like, do they love what you're doing?
So I've approached Police Legacy and I'm starting conversations with the employee assistance services through police, and have some interest through some research as well. So I haven't had specific conversations with the police services yet. That will come, and I haven't pushed it because I haven't really needed to yet. And there's also that risk of, I also promote myself as completely non-government and autonomous, and maintaining that sense of independence is also a principle I've been trying to maintain and observe and see where I go with that.
Yeah, that's actually a really valid point, because you do need to be separate. So, sort of like, I understand everything that goes on in there, but I'm not part of it anymore, so that they feel comfortable talking to you. So in the space of your business now, how long have you had it for? 6 months, 8 months, a year?
Yep.
I don't know. I'll ask you the question, but and you'll be able to tell me whether anything's happened. Have you had any big failures or successes? Anything go wrong that you've learned from yet? Or not yet?
Absolutely. But one of the main, things that didn't go as well as I would have thought was that I started to go down the rabbit hole of, I started noticing trying to justify a lot of my messaging and posting became a bit negative. I was talking in the deficit. I was talking with a deficit model instead of a strength model. And I wondered why I was feeling so uncomfortable. It was because I wasn't remaining and staying on a path. I was trying to diversify a little bit and thinking, well, if I go down this way, I might get a couple of those clients or those clients. And I went back to my original niche and track, and I have to trust that and keep going forward. And that kind of pulled me up to go, I'm going to rewrite those posts. I'm going to rewrite my messaging, and I'm going to focus the language in a strength-based way, because otherwise it will look, deficit models won't attract the people I want. So
no, and look, one of the things that you've said is absolutely spot on, and it's something that I talk about a lot with people particularly when I'm doing PR with them, because I'll say, who's your market? And they'll go, women. And I go, oh my God, how can you possibly market to women? There are so many different kinds, and it's really hard to niche down, because a lot of people go, but what about all those people I'm now that won't come to me? I'm losing all these customers. But you don't think that actually you're going to become specialized at something. And the more niche it is, the more you will become the only person people can go to. You're probably one of the only if not the only, ex-police officer that has gone into this space and is helping people now move out. So you are now the person people will go to. So that's just great general advice for anyone that might be listening. That niching down, if you can say, I only deal with 14-year-old curly-haired redheads, then you are able specifically to talk to those people in a way that will really resonate. So, how do you juggle work and life these days? Because when it becomes a passion, and I know that it is for you, it's really hard to put it down and go, it's evening, I'm going to spend the time with the kids or with my partner or whatever. Or are you I dabble day and night and I'm just constantly on? Or do you give yourself time to switch off?
I have a tendency to dabble day and night. So
Right.
I am aware of my tendency because everyone has their personal traits and I have a monkey mind. So I want to do 50 million things,
Yep.
Jules.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
but I can't do 50 million things. But I do practice hot yoga. So I have my time out in yoga. And then
Yep.
I'm trying to then bring those practices into daily everyday tasks so that when I feel my monkey mind going, I concentrate on one thing because I will have
Yes, that
10
it's
lists going and I can be terribly undisciplined, but that's what makes me amazingly creative. So I have to be aware of that and and
yes.
and focus. So
And but do you give yourself the weekends off and that sort of thing?
oh,
Great.
yes. This weekend, my husband and I are going away down to the Southern Bales wine region. So I'm
Well,
working towards
gorgeous.
being able to switch stuff off. And I don't schedule any posts on the weekend either. I do a Monday to Friday thing. That's my thing around Happy Friday and welcome back to the week, that kind of thing. So people
Yeah,
know that
nice.
I switch off.
Yeah, I think that that's really important. And I love it that you're going away this weekend because for anyone who's listening, I'm in one of the 10 suburbs that's just been locked down for another 4 weeks in Victoria.
I'm
So I ain't going
sorry.
anywhere. I'm going to have to undo all the things that I was planning on doing. Now, is there a quirky fact that most people don't know about you that you would like to share with us?
Well, probably the quirky fact is what I mentioned earlier, which was I became quarterfinalist for Raw Comedy in South Australia, which I often do one of those, the three truths and a lie scenario if I'm speaking to a group, and they
Right?
never pick it, never.
I love that. That's a great fact. Okay, so I'm just going to wind it up now. I absolutely have loved speaking to you. It's so great to get an insight as well into the police that we hear about all the time, particularly now through the pandemic, and kind of understand that they are humans and that, not that I would think otherwise, but just that there are all those stresses and strains outside of everything that we're looking at, that we need to take into account. But moving on to the fun stuff, I don't know whether you play with your phone or what you do, but I'm very keen to know, are there a couple of apps on the phone that you've used for business that you've found to be quite useful? And if you don't play with your phone, that's fine, but I have to ask the question because I'm obsessed.
Yeah, so the two apps that I find the most useful are my Google Calendar and
Yes.
and my bank app, my CommBank app, because
Right,
I
so I'm
don't.
going to. Okay, so now I'm going to remove those as your options because everybody says that. Do you have any business apps that you use? Meditate. Look at your
Oh,
face. If anybody, just for anyone who's watching, she's just gone into a meltdown like, oh my God, because I forgot to say, which I normally say to people, what useful apps outside of banking, email, and all the obvious ones? I
um,
mean, like I play with Candy Crush and I cannot stop myself and Words with Friends, but there are really useful business apps out there that people use. Like one I often talk about is called Otter. I don't know if you've heard of it,
I've heard of
but
it.
so Otter is free and it gives you 10 hours of free transcriptions a month. And all you have to do is just put it on your phone, turn it on, and it'll turn the conversation so it records it as audio, but also turns it into text that you can send to yourself and edit. And you
No.
get 10 hours a month for free.
You're doing that one as soon as we get off the phone.
I can't help myself with apps. I just absolutely love them. The other one that I love is Jotnot. And Jotnot turns your phone into a scanner so that if somebody sends you a document you need to sign, it'll actually put it into black and white, turn it into a PDF, and you can do multiple pages and send it off.
I'm doing that one too. Jotnot and Otter.
Jotnot, Jot. But have you got any that you use that you've discovered?
Well, Canva, I'm getting better at doing as an app.
Canva is a godsend, isn't it? It's amazing.
And my fun one, because I'm as you picked up, quite quirky, is I do a lot of memes.
Oh,
So
yeah.
so I'll pick something up and then make it a meme. So I've got like this meme generator, and another fun one is my talking pet. So
Oh, I love my talking pet. Go on, explain what it is for anyone that doesn't know.
So my talking pet is, if you've got it helps having a face-on shot of a cat or a dog or a horse or a giraffe or whatever. You upload the photo, you can move an icon around near to where the mouth and the eyes are, and then record your voice and change the voice tone and speed, and then it'll sync your voice to the pet photo, and then you can upload your little video of your pet talking about, whatever you want.
I think that's brilliant. And I'll this will probably turn your stomach, but who knows? My really good friend is Bev Killick. I don't know if you know her. She's a stand-up comedian and she is very un-PC.
Yep.
And we all went out for drinks one day and came back to my place, and she takes her boobs out anywhere that you are. When I met her, she had a show called, I think it was called Busting Out. And it was like puppetry of the penis, but with boobs.
I love it.
So these two women would lean over and do the Batman logo and all this kind of thing. Anyway, so she literally will take her boobs out anywhere. I watched her do a stand-up where she took her bra off, put a wine bottle under her boob and poured someone a glass of wine. No hands. And this day she used the pet app on her boob. And she literally kind of squashed in her nipple so it looked like a mouth. And then it was so funny. She put it up on Facebook and she got a call from her daughter I don't know, maybe 30 seconds later going, "Get that off now. Oh my God, Mum."
Oh, kids are terrible, aren't they?
They are,
everything.
but that app is just so cute with animal figures. It's just gorgeous. But I just had to say that. I don't know whether that was appropriate, but then I do say inappropriate things sometimes. So, Melanie, I have absolutely loved our interview. Thank you so much for sharing all that with me. It is a brilliant service, and I'm sure that you will actually probably save lives with this, but certainly save people's mental health. So, I really appreciate you sharing it, and I cannot wait to see what you do over the next while, because I have a feeling you're going to crack this one and give you another 5 years and you might be onto something else with one of your other new shiny ideas.
Well, I aim to give this a red hot crack, and I'm very passionate about it and enjoying it a lot, and thank you so much for your time and the opportunity.
No, that's great. I love it that you're going to make a difference, so thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this She's the Boss chat episode. It was great to have you here. If you want to stay in touch, you might also like some of the other things that we've got going on with She's the Boss. Firstly, I've got the She's the Boss show, which is on Ticker TV. Now, you can watch that either on tickertv.com.au or you can download the Ticker app from any of the app stores. So Apple and Android, and they've got an app that is for your phone, for your iPad or tablet, and for the smart TV. Or you could join us for our free Zoom lunches for female founders that we hold online. The best way to do any of these things really is go to she'stheboss.com.au, and on there you can register for the lunches, and I've also got links to the website. So either way, I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm really enjoying digging down and getting down to the nitty-gritty with these women, and I hope you'll join me for the next episode.